Okay. Right. So it is day 9, I believe. And last night slash this morning, I did have a little bit of progress that I want to tell you guys about. Not a lucid dream, but I wouldn't even really call it a vivid dream because it took quite some effort to remember. But that being said, it's probably the most detailed entry that I've ever written. What is this? One, two, three, four, five, almost 6 double-sided pages. So right before I read this, I also feel like I almost had a moment of lucidity, not within the dream last night, but more so as I was drifting and I was talking about uh, how as I'm falling asleep, I tend to get that hypnagogic imagery, that kind of momentum building, almost like a daydream, but it kind of seems to take over a little bit. um, I was having that, and suddenly I realized, oh, I'm having that hypnagogic imagery. And it was as though by realizing that, I suddenly got too excited. I began to wake up too much. But I had this brief moment of lucidity where I was teetering on the line between I'm dreaming and I'm aware of it, and I'm awake and I'm just thinking about random stuff. But I think that's a good little bit of progress. I feel a little emboldened by that. And the other thing as well is that this morning I woke up at about 10 past 3 in the morning, and I remembered the latter half of the dream I'm about to read to you guys. And it was like usual. I laid there piecing the dream together in my mind. I was really groggy and falling asleep. And then I basically just fell asleep. But then I woke up again shortly before my alarm, so probably about 6:30 or something like that, and I had this random image that popped into my head, and you'll get it in just a moment. It was the first part of this dream where basically I was at a long table. I knew that I was at my wedding, but it wasn't the right venue. And I was at the head of this long table, and I had a handful of cake, like this really creamy kind of cake, and I was shoveling it into my mouth. Like, it was all over my nose and my chin. It was like up the inside forearm of my suit. It was really gross. But the moment that image popped into my head, it's like everything else in the timeline of the dream unlocked, and I remembered it. And feverishly, I went, I have to write this down or I'm going to forget it again. And I rolled over, I grabbed my phone, I eagerly tapped away into the notes app, and I know how frantically I wrote it down because I was so worried about forgetting it, because I was rereading it to write it in here today, and there were so many spelling mistakes, um, which is very uncharacteristic of me. And anyway, I'm going to read this dream out. Um, it's very weird. It makes me sound like I've got a very guilty conscience. But let's get straight into it. Okay. I'm at my wedding at the head of a long table. The cake has just been served. It's extremely creamy. I'm shoveling it into my mouth greedily. It's all over my nose and my chin and my hands. It even slops onto my suit. And I'm eating it, by the way, I didn't write this, but I'm eating it with my hands. Like, I'm not using a fork. One of my ex-girlfriends, I'm not sure which, but I know in the dream that she's an ex. And I have my suspicions about which one it was, but it's she's sitting up the table to my right, and I somehow know that she's here with her partner, and I know their whole relationship story. We seem to be on very good terms. She approaches me, beaming. She and I messily eat the cake together with our hands. Her partner is watching, and he seems jealous or insecure. One thing that was weird about this is I don't often dream about people that I don't recognize. And this made up partner of hers, I remember he was quite um, uh, similar features to me. He had longer brown hair, quite what's the word? Um, Not jaundice, quite jaunt, like very distinct cheekbones and stuff. He had a beard, um, and he seemed jealous or insecure. Somehow I was aware that he enjoyed running, and for some reason I decide I'm going to get up from the table, leave the building through a door to my left, and I'm going to run along the beach. And I run off along this beach. I didn't recognize this location either, which again is really weird for me. Usually, when I dream about places, it's places that I've been. I run in this silly loping way, and I watch my shadow move against the sand as I run. I come across a wooden structure. It was kind of, I forget the word for this, like I don't know if you call it a pergola. It was like a domed structure made of wood with like bars that only came up waist height. And there is a large, fat, injured man being interviewed by the press. There was this female reporter, and she's asking him questions about how he got injured. I approach him and I kneel down. He's against the wooden beams of the structure. I try to support him. He and an elderly woman I can see on a symmetrical structure across the road that I think might have been either my auntie or my grandmother. They both ask me to help him twist his trunk as he's got an arthritic spine. So I push and I pull his shoulders, and they both look relieved. The man and the woman who's watching. Then the dream changed. I don't know if I sort of drifted out of the dream and then came back into a different one, or if the dream just changed. I don't recall, but suddenly I'm traveling to some kind of gym facility. Um, I've dreamt of a similar one before, and in other dreams, I've dreamt of this place. It's an enormous area, and it's sort of like an indoor play facility, like one of those ones with playgrounds and trampolines and stuff like that for kids. But in every time I've ever dreamt of this location, everything is made of wood. It's not made of like plastic, like those places that you go to for kids. And often when I dream about this place, it's because I dream that my childhood instructor from karate was. I dream that it's his school for some reason. I've never been to this location either, but it's a familiar one that I think I dream about a lot. Anyway, I'm there with a dream character that is an amalgamation of Eddie and John. So a training partner of mine, one of my best friends. He was one of my groomsmen at my wedding, and John is my boxing coach. There are two Pacific Islanders, like twins, identical twins, and they seem to know us too. They're identical and they resemble Rion, my old training partner. We're joking around in this long queue that was kind of like along a big banister that then went down. It culminates in a rope gate that leads down a steep, long wooden stairway. The Islander twins start pushing each other and play fighting, and one of them trips and falls all the way down. When we reach them, I ask if he's okay, but they're both laughing about it. Um, I walk across this gym outside to these big open parking lots with cars parked there, and there's groups of people gathered around. Arrogantly, I strut around the cars, inspecting them and judging them harshly as though they were brought here for me. I ask the crowd which cars are even working and which ones have roadworthy certificates. Uh, I remember it narrowed the cars down to like three, and I remember thinking like, oh, I'll take these three back with me or whatever. Um, I move on, and I end up again. This is one of those weird transitions where I end up in this weird situation in which I know that I have committed a murder, but I don't remember actually dreaming the murder itself. Instead, I just know that I have, and I have this intense foreboding sense of doom that I'm about to be caught. I begin to burn all of the evidence. And I remember the evidence was like a foam dog bed, although I never would hurt a dog, and these big clumps of like fluff and dust and piles of paper. Anyway, I begin to burn the evidence, which is mostly paper. I put it in my old fire pit, which was this half gallon drum thing, and I douse it in gasoline. Right before I light it, I hear two young girls in the next room freaking out. One of them, from their voice, I know is Charlotte, who is a student that I teach. I fear that their hysterics will attract investigators that are looking for me. Barbara, one of my instructors that works for me, is there, and she's growing more and more desperate. Oh, and growing more and more desperate, I angrily order her to carry the bin outside and burn it. She stares at me wide-eyed and afraid, but refuses due to a bad back. Angrily, I dismiss her, asking her to deal with the girls, and I take the bin outside. The fuel sloshes onto my pants. I remember in the dream I was wearing these grey sweatpants. Barbara meets me outside, and I ask her to light the fire as I leave. I find myself hiding in the post renovations Eve Close house. This is one of the homes that I grew up in when I was about between the ages of 8 and about 14, I think 14, 15. I can hear others discussing that I'm on the run, suspected for murder, and I can also hear it on the news on the television. I go and sit on my parents' bed in the master bedroom, presumably waiting for the cops to come and arrest me. I feel confident that the evidence has been destroyed. I overhear a female police officer speaking on how evil and vile I am and that my rampage of terror is over. I didn't write this down because I couldn't quite communicate it properly. I'm going to try now verbally, but I remember also near the end, it was almost, this sounds so weird. It was as though she was describing me as though I was the evil emperor from Star Wars, and um, that I was somehow planning to expand my empire. And now that they'd caught me for murder, I wasn't going to be able to do that. Also, I remember her voice was very similar or identical even to the voice of two of my aunties blended together. Now, again, I don't look back on this as an ambiguous stimuli and judge it that way. It was more that in the dream, I went, oh, that's Auntie Julie and Auntie Janet. Um, anyway, very weird dream. I have almost completed this journal. This is how much of it is left, and this is how much of it I've completed. That being said, this was not exclusively a dream journal, and I'm actually writing double spaced. I'm kind of, I hate throwing away notebooks. I don't like it, but this one is really tattered, like the back cover's coming off. It was just a cheap notebook that I bought years ago, back in 2022, and it's not a dream journal. It's filled with like all sorts of to-do lists, and then I used it as a notebook during my security course. So I've got a bunch of sketches in here. But I thought, you know what? I have all these stacks of half-filled journals, and I don't want to waste them by just throwing them out. So I figured I'll work my way through them and use them predominantly as dream journals now. Uh, I even went out and bought myself a nice fountain pen from the Sunday market. So anyway, bit of progress there. I'm really hoping that I am able to remember my dream tomorrow, because so far it's been 9 days, and although I've recalled two other dreams, successfully recalled two other dreams, I haven't done it on consecutive nights. I think that taking vitamin B6 is helping. I don't really know. Uh, uh yeah, I'm not really 100% sure. Uh, but that being said, I wanted to kind of note this funny little synchronicity that occurred last night, because it was one of the first times where I legitimately performed a reality check because it was so over the top that I went, "Am I dreaming right now?" And what it was I was listening to an episode. I was taking my dog for she's sitting right there, so I don't want to say it. I was taking her for a walk, and I was listening to an episode of Joe Rogan's podcast with Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick franchise. Because again, for those of you who might be watching this video first, without having any other context, I have set myself the goal of having a lucid dream, but to make it a little more concrete, I keep focusing on, all right, I want to put myself in the John Wick universe. And anyway, I'm listening to this podcast, and then they started talking about the likelihood that our world, our universe, is a simulation, and how many scientists believe that it is more likely that this is a simulation than it is not. And at the time, I was kind of getting a bit bored with that episode, and I went, "That's an interesting thought. I'm gonna switch podcasts," and I switched to another podcast. Smosh's podcast. And I had already listened to their most recent one, so I listened to the next one back. I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in it, just because of the different cast members that they were guesting on that episode. But I went back, and the first thing that they talk about in this other podcast is lucid dreaming. And the girl in the podcast, Arasha, she was talking about her experience of becoming obsessed with lucid dreams when she was in primary school or early high school. And it was so what's the word? So parallel to my own experience that I remember I actually thought to myself, I just went from hearing about how we're all in a simulation to choosing a podcast at random, and it just so happening to fall exactly into my number one goal right now. And I went, "Am I dreaming?" And I stopped and I counted my fingers. I checked the time on my phone, looked around. I kind of narrated to myself, "All right, what am I doing? I'm walking my dog, and you know, I'm in my neighborhood." But anyway, it was just really weird. Anyway, a bit of a ranting, raving entry today. I can see we're almost at 20 minutes. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm quietly hopeful that tonight I might not, I really want to have 2 consecutive nights where I recall my dreams, because again, in Stephen LaBerge's book, he says that if you can recall a dream every night, you're probably at a good stage to start lucid dreaming. But anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm Nick. This is Project Lucidity, and onwards and upwards. Cheers.